Colleen, it is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. What a blessing to visit you during your final era of life to share this story. I remember first meeting you and being so compelled by your story. You're such an amazing woman, entrepreneur, mother, friend, to name a few of your accomplishments, starting 12 companies during a time where women just didn't do that, having 8 exits. You're a 28-year-old VP at a real estate firm with a private jet, jetting around and closing deals and just running it. And on top of that, you found true love in your life. You've also had amazing family. You've traveled the world. You've created many things. You've impacted the worlds of healthcare. You've overcome cancer so many times. And now you are learning how to let go and die in grace and beauty and dignity. What a legend. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for that acknowledgement. I'm really humbled by everything you said. That's so beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's anywhere you'd like to start in particular. There's obviously so much to dive into.
Where do you think we should start?
I think honestly, just sharing a little bit about. So one thing I just want to acknowledge, like this podcast is incredibly special because we don't know if you're going to have another day left, another month left. I think maybe just starting with your health journey and where you're at to give that context, then we can kind of dive into like the career side, love, magic, all the other stuff.
Okay, thank you. I have a genetic mutation called Lynch syndrome, and my father had it, and my brother has it, and it causes cancer. It's a chromosomal defect, and so it causes like 60 different types of cancer. So I first had cancer in 2002. And it was stage 4, and they told me I would probably only live a couple years, but they were very wrong. So I've had a 22-year bonus life, and I've had cancer 4 more times since then.
Wow.
And every time I've always lived. So now they told me in March that I had 3 to 6 months to live. Well, I'm still here. And they told me in September that I have 3 months, and I'm still here. And the cancer's all through my body. It's in 30 different areas now.
Oh, God.
And I'm
crazy.
feeling myself declining. I sleep a lot. Like I'm correlating it when a baby's born, the first 6 months of its life, it sleeps most of the time. I'm doing that kind of in reverse. I'm on the other end ready to leave the planet, and I'm sleeping a lot. Like maybe I'm awake 8 hours every day.
Wow.
So I sleep about 12 to 14 hours at night, and then a couple hours in the daytime. So it's almost getting to the point where there's not a lot of differentiation between my waking hours and my sleeping hours. It all feels kind of like a dream.
Wow.
But I have made a challenge for myself all my life. I've done life like it's a game. And so I set up different challenges for myself. And my challenge with this is, I know they're right. I'm dying. I can tell.
Yeah.
I don't have a huge amount of pain, which I'm very, very grateful for. And my challenge is to stay cheerful and happy throughout the process and to have a joyful death. And so some of my friends and people that love me think it's a little crazy, but I am doing it.
Wow.
So,
yeah. No, I think it's so admirable because one thing that's always struck me about our culture in the modern world is the way that we metabolize negativity. And even I noticed this with like the Maui wildfires. Wildfires that just destroyed that whole town. It was just like, oh, this horrible thing happened. Everyone's sad. This is terrible. But there was no deeper level of like, this is what they're learning. This is how they're growing through it. This is like new perspectives that have emerged in that process. And I think that sometimes people can latch on to like, oh, this horrible thing is happening, stay in that destination. But in reality, it's just an indicator of a journey, and you can choose with your mindset and your heart what path you actually want to take. And I think that's why it's been so compelling to know you, is you're a creator. You're not a consumer. You're not someone who is just letting life create itself through you. You've actively chosen the path that you want to take, and you fearlessly live in that truth. And I think it's been amazing to know you. I mean, we first met when you came to LA and you stayed in my home, and I gave you a discount to stay there, and about 50% off when I had other people offering even above the market rate for that rental. And I fell in love with you. I was like, I just want you in the space.
Thank you.
And yeah, I feel like you're a woman that attracts blessings because of who you are.
Thank you. And I don't know if it's that I am blessed or that I attract blessings. I'm not sure which it is, but I definitely have blessings all the time. All the time. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to know you. And I want to say, everything you say about me, my best friend in 3rd grade said it takes one to know one. So everything you're saying about me is true of you.
Thank you, Colleen.
So we're kindred spirits, and we met, and that's so wonderful. I'm very grateful.
Yeah. I'd love to dive in deeper to your philosophies as you're approaching death, and how you've basically repelled this momentum to just vortex into that victimhood. And instead, every moment you choose like that positive outlook, you create the death that you want, just as you've created the life that you want. I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, I'd like to take credit for it. But the first person that taught me how to do this was my son, Jeff. And Jeff had a heart condition, and he was in and out of hospitals for 7 years from age 18 to 25 until he died. And his whole philosophy was, you have today. And live while you can. And hey, he said, I'm going to be really young and good looking at my funeral. And he just made a joke about it. And for him, it was just live fully, live as fully as you can, and live each day as a gift and as a blessing. So he was my first teacher in that regard. And my second teacher in that regard was my husband. And he had a disease that was terminal, but he had it for about 7 years before he died. And so for the first 2 years, he was well enough, and we went all over the world, did everything he ever wanted to do, just had a great ending for him. But he, once in a while, would wake up and say, well, I woke up and I got really depressed because I realized I'm going to die pretty soon. And then he stopped and he said, but I have today. So what can we do that will be really fun and wonderful today? So those two people were my teachers.
Wow.
And I'm not afraid of death because I've approached it many times. I had my first near-death experience at age 9.
What happened then?
I had encephalitis from an infected mosquito, and that is where your brain swells. I was in a coma for a whole summer.
A whole summer?
Yeah.
3 months in a coma?
Yes. And I recall...
At 9?
Yes.
Wow.
And I recall being up above my body and looking down, and my mother and my father and my brother and my sisters were standing around my body in this hospital room, and they were all crying.
Oh my God, that would be terrifying.
And I said, I've got to go back. They're too sad.
They're waiting for me.
I'm making them wait. Too sad.
Oh, that's so cute.
So I came back. And so I think I don't have the same fear of death that a lot of people do. My belief is that we are eternal beings. And so I'm not sure what's going to happen next. No one really knows. I mean, everyone has different thoughts, and different religions say different things, but has anyone ever really proven it? So I'm a little excited because I'm soon going to find out what that really is and what really happens. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's interesting.
So I think, I'm not sure, but I have a wonderful doctor who's so kind, and I told him I want to experience a conscious death. I don't want to do hospice where they give you lots of drugs. I don't want to be drugged. I want to take as few pain medications as possible. So I do take some at night, but not in the daytime, because I want to be as conscious as I can be during the process.
Wow.
And he's working with me and kind enough to do that, and said he might even do it himself when it's his turn.
Wow.
But I'm trying to remain a part of the experience rather than blocking it out.
Wow. What are you learning about yourself and your life by maintaining a level of cognitive function and consciousness while embracing death?
Well, I've been doing a lot of reminiscing and looking back on my life. And I suppose that's probably what you do when you're at this stage.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is that many things that I focused on in my teens, in my 20s, in my 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s meant nothing. And I gave so much energy and attention to them. And they mean nothing. And so for the last, since March, when they told me I was going to die in 3 or 6 months, I've been busily giving everything away and really cleaning up everything in my life. So when I leave, there's nothing for anyone to have to do. And so none of it means anything to me now. And it's like a problem getting rid of all the things that I accumulated.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
It's very funny that we spend our lives accumulating money, houses, possessions, cars, jewelry, all these things we accumulate. And then they don't mean anything. And then you just give them away.
I think that's really interesting, because I think so many people are caught in that unconscious cycle of it's never good enough. Always more money, more things, a nicer car, a hotter partner, whatever it is, it's just this never ending feedback loop. And I think it's really interesting to hear that perspective of reaching that inflection point in time where you just kind of realize, like, oh, this all has to go. Like, nothing is truly owned, nothing is truly possessed. It becomes a burden, at a certain point. It goes from being an asset to a burden. And I wonder what your thoughts are on this. Like, if you could give advice to people being in this mindset now about reframing that relationship with collecting or accumulating material things, what would you say?
Well, first of all, I was probably like right up there with the people that do that. I mean, my whole goal for a lot of my life was bigger houses, latest car, more money, more everything.
Yeah.
And so I was really right up there with it. And I think maybe we have to experience all that to let it go. I don't know. I mean, I think there's two schools of thought. Like, you could become non-materialistic by saying you don't have anything, or you can become non-materialistic by having everything and knowing it means nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think maybe we need to
yin-yang.
accumulate all that to realize it means nothing.
Yeah. I've been practicing essentialism, which to me is an art and a science of having the right things. Because I noticed this early on when I moved a lot, and I started moving a lot because I got caught up in this nomadic momentum of traveling the world and different opportunities and a global network. And I came from a small town and a culture that is very rigid, and everyone grows up there and like spends their lives there, and it's a very specific way. So when I caught the scent of like this new way of being, I was just on it. And I realized a lot of the things that I thought I had sentimental relationships with just bogged me down. And I remember this pivotal moment when I'd stored all this stuff in LA, and it was over the pandemic, and I went back to the storage unit, and I realized I'd spent more on the storage than the value of the items, although some of them were quite sentimental, and I did have like nice clothes from nice brands and this and that. And I just remember feeling overwhelmed, like I want to give this to somebody, I want to give this to someone who would appreciate it, but there's not anyone around. So okay, I'm just gonna go donate everything. In that first experience of just fully letting everything go, it was so liberating. And since then, I've moved multiple times, and like each time I'm becoming more aware of just not accumulating. And the things I do accumulate, it's like ancient Japanese, like tea sets that my former romantic partner gifted me, or I had this like Chinese tea set that I bought myself, or like every single thing that's actually mine is like incredibly bespoke. It tends to be historical, and it's just a very specific reflection, like a hologram of me and my values, and what I genuinely enjoy. And I found that sweet spot of like not a lot of things, but like really nice things that represent me, to be kind of that nice middle ground between the two.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I did that in April. Uh, I had the Maui property had been sold, and I had 2 storage units full of things.
Oh, wow.
Some of them quite valuable, quite wonderful. So what I did is in April and May, I went to Maui, and I invited many, many people and told them it was an estate sale, except everything was free.
Nice.
And people were at first shy about taking things. And then I said, oh no, everything you take, you're helping me. So please take as much as you can.
That's sweet.
And out of that, I furnished 3 different people's houses.
Wow.
And all kinds of other people were gifted things that they really loved. And so I feel like for me, it was after the fires, people did need things on Maui. And for me, it was like leaving pieces of myself all over Maui. So I probably will never be on Maui again, but there are pieces of myself there everywhere.
Your legacy lives on.
Yeah, in a way,
Yeah.
It was fun, actually. It was great fun to give things away.
Yeah, I think it's a very healthy practice to let things go. And you're obviously a master at this, having had to face these various cancers over the years and letting your son go, and wanted to dive deeper into that because it's quite compelling that you're able to raise a family amidst all of the different entrepreneurial endeavors and business endeavors that came over time, and would love to hear more about that. Like, how did you balance those two worlds?
Well, sometimes not very well. But I was of the generation when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. The thought was, it was kind of the beginning of feminism. And the thought was that women could do it all. And so at that time, you couldn't even have a credit card in your own name, or you couldn't get a car loan without a husband. And so women didn't have that many rights. But I bought into that, we could do everything. You could have a family, you could be a CEO, you can do it, be on nonprofit boards, you can do it all. And so I tried that, I did that. Looking back, I was exhausted most of the time.
Because your husband was more of like the stay-at-home. Because I know you'd mentioned like if you want to dive into that.
Well, no, my husband that I'm no longer married to, my ex-husband was a kind, good person, but was not overly ambitious. The husband that I married after that was my true love, and he had been very ambitious. But when I met him and married him, I was older and he was too. So we just had time to play and have fun and travel together.
Wow.
So Yeah, when you're young, you don't always know who you are. At least I didn't. I didn't really know who I was till I was maybe 40.
Wow.
And yet, as a child, I was one of 5 children. And my mother didn't know what to do with me. I was really different. Like at 8 years old, I told her I was a Brownie Scout. And I told her I was going to sell more Girl Scout cookies than anyone in our town. And she said, you can't do that. There are high school girls that are Girl Scouts that are going to be selling cookies. You're not going to be able to do that. And I said, I'm going to do it. And so, being the kind, good mother she was, she drove me from block to block as I went door to door. And I sold more cookies than anyone in my town. And my mother just didn't understand me. But my grandfather did. My grandfather had been involved in the early days of aviation, and he had started an airport, and he was entrepreneurial. So he saw who I was all the time. And when I was young, one of my favorite things to do was to go to his house and sit in his office and sit at his desk and play business. And I would stamp papers and I'd write things. And he indulged me. He thought that was great.
That's so sweet. I love that.
And when I was about 13, I had cousins and brothers and sisters, and there were maybe 10 of us at a luncheon at my grandfather's house. And he stood up at the luncheon and said, out of all of you sitting here, there's just one person I would invest in a company with. And I thought he was going to say my brother or one of my cousins, but he said Colleen. And I went, what? What's he talking about?
Aww.
And I didn't understand because I didn't recognize who I was yet. He recognized it, but I didn't.
Did he end up investing in one of your companies?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. Because you actually started 12 companies in your lifetime.
Yeah.
Wow. And 12 companies, a foundation.
I've started a school. I've started, a lot of the school especially. My son was born 3 months early, and so he had 25 areas of brain damage.
Wow.
And we lived in Del Mar, California, in San Diego County. There wasn't a school in Southern California from LA down to San Diego that could teach special needs children.
Wow.
So I was 38, I think, 37. I had a brand new infant and I had a really demanding job. But the choice was I either somehow started a school for my son or we had to send him away to another state to go to school. Well, I didn't want to send him away. So I found other parents, and there were a group of about 10 of us. And I had no idea what I'm doing. I don't know anything about education. I'd never done a nonprofit before. I'd never done anything. But somehow that school was needed and all the pieces just came in. And they told me it would probably take about 5 years to start it, but we started it 6 months later.
Wow.
The school still exists. 150 children a year go there.
Wow.
And a lot of them take the train down from LA to Del Mar and stay with families there and go to school because it's one of the best schools for special needs children in Southern California.
Wow.
So it was that was something I had no idea how to do, but I had to do it for my son.
Wow.
So I think of that school as a memorial to him.
Aww.
Had he not been born, that school would not exist.
Wow. Isn't it crazy how these, and back to that theme we were talking about in the beginning, if you had just leaned into that negative mindset of oh, I have a special needs kid, this is a burden, instead of having that mindset of let this be an adventure, let me embrace it. You've impacted so many more lives, and it's become a blessing in disguise for many people because you're able to think in greater levels of dimensionality. And so returning to this theme, I just see it in so many areas of your life. It's why I love hanging out with you. It's why I love talking to you about everything. And I'm curious, about some of these different companies and entrepreneurial ventures. I know that now that you're reflecting and wrapping up the era of your life, I'd love to hear about some of your favorites, some of the ones that you feel like have really left that impression on you now that you're preparing to leave this life.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I've always believed that there aren't limitations and that everyone can do whatever they set their mind to do. So one of my very first jobs, I worked for the Federal Intermediate Credit Bank. And my job, part of it was to go to college campuses and interview people to become loan officers. And it was a big deal that I had that job because they'd never had a young woman do that before. I was about 22 or 23. And so I had a performance review with the fellow that was the vice president, and he asked me what my goals were. And I said, well, I want to have your job. I want to be a vice president. And he got really flustered and he said, look, we're already letting you do things that no one's ever done before as a woman. And now you want to be a vice president? That's not going to happen. Well, this was a federal agency, back in those days. I mean, basically they were breaking the law by telling me that. But what I did out of that is I said, okay, well, thank you very much. And then I resigned the next day.
Wow.
And I went to this savings and loan and told them I wanted to be a vice president, and they made me a vice president.
Really?
And then they used my picture and my name in all their advertisement for the next year. So I knew that man that said I couldn't be a vice president got to see that I became one.
Literally the next day.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So that was kind of when I was very young. And then when I was older and 27, I was fortunate enough to be hired by the top apartment and condo developer in Southern California. And he had been doing his work for 30 years. And he wanted to find someone that he could download everything he'd learned into them so that he could travel and I could make decisions and things while he was gone. And I was so fortunate. I should have paid him for the opportunity, but they had a 120-foot yacht with a crew of 12 that I got to take investors down to Cabo San Lucas on, and they had a private plane and a big motorhome to drive investors to look at the lots that were going to be built on. And I had an endless budget to give parties for the investors and a private dining room with a chef so that I could have them come to lunch. And I had a car and I had a clothing allowance. It was like the dream
like
job of all times. and I really loved it. And my job was to bring investors in. It was very easy because it was Southern California, and during that time, everything doubled every 5 years. So it was a pretty easy thing to convince people to invest in. And so at about 28, I became a vice president of that company and really loved real estate development and did that for many years until the early 1990s when this new thing was on the horizon, and it was technology. And what was this? But I could see that it was coming, and so I had a friend who was a headhunter, and I said, well, I want to work in the technology field, get me a job. And so no one knew very much about it at all. So he got me a job. I worked for Boeing in a satellite technology, private encrypted communication company. And they had an engineer work with me for a whole year to teach me everything that there was about technology at that time.
Wow.
And it was interesting. It was really fun. But I was a couple years into it, and I was up in a boardroom in Seattle with about 25 people doing forward planning for this company. And I'm not an engineer, and I didn't really even know anything about technology before they hired me. So I had this idea, oh my gosh, the internet is starting to happen. People aren't going to need to pay huge amounts of money for private encrypted communication via satellite. They can do it over the internet. So I thought, there's all these people, and they're all like, this is their field more than mine, and maybe I'm wrong. But finally, after sitting and thinking that for about an hour, I finally put it out there, and everybody's jaw dropped because they hadn't realized that the company we were doing forward planning with was going to be obsolete.
Wow. And then what happened?
Then I left.
You're like, all right.
And then I started all those companies. I had a crew of people. We had about 6 of us, programmers, engineers, different marketing people, and we'd put together a company. And it was so easy in those days because nobody knew anything about anything. And it was just the whole wide world was available. So you just pick a place that didn't have a presence yet, and you'd build out a business plan and build out a website, and boom, someone would buy your company.
Wow.
So we did that over and over and over.
Wow.
And it was really fun. Really, really fun.
Wow. Wow.
And the last company that I did in that era was a partnership with Experian. So here we are, this little company, and we go to Experian. It was a multi-billion-dollar multinational company, and tell them, this internet thing is really happening, and it's really happening fast, and there's going to be this thing coming up called identity theft. And you're going to be really impacted by it. And we want to let you know about it, and we want to work with you to build a way to deter that. So they partnered with us, and we built out a product that they still sell today. They call it Credit Manager to help deter identity theft.
Wow. Wow.
So it was fun. It was really fun. We had a great time. All of us did.
One of the thoughts popping up in my head right now is, how many different low-key legacies are you leaving? Because the school's one. This tool that Experian is using still is another. Tell me more. There's got to be more.
I don't know. And it doesn't really matter because the way I do things is I'll do something and then I let it go. And the part that I love is the doingness, is the creating. And I always used to say, and I found out more and more as life goes on, that it's really true that I'm really good at starting things, but I'm not very good at maintaining things. And that's why, for me, if I could start something and sell it, and then start something else and sell it, it's a perfect model for me to follow. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I think I quit building companies because my son was getting sicker and sicker. And then I got cancer for the first time, and I almost died. And then a year later, he died.
That must have been a really tough time.
It's a horrible year from August of 2002 to August of 2003.
Oh
it was
gosh.
really a really bad year. But when I look back...
Maybe we can turn that off.
Yeah. I do believe that it's best to get all of your bad luck over with at once. And so I think it was actually a blessing that it all happened in 1 year versus it going on for 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years. It was horrible, and it was over.
Did you apply the same mindset of focus on the positive during that year? Or were you just kind of like, everything sucks, like,
I did apply it up to the point when my son actually died. And then I went into this deep, deep, horrible place where I thought, why am I still alive? I was supposed to die, and then he died. And what is the purpose? What is the purpose of still being alive? And I was just in this horrible place. And I thought, well, it's grief and just bring it on, let me experience it all. And really thought my life was over. I lived in the city of Del Mar, which is at the beach, but there's cliffs behind it. And in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep, I'd go out at 2 or 3 in the morning and walk up and down the cliffs until I was exhausted and I could sleep. And it was around that time that I met my husband.
Ooh, I love this story.
And he was the most amazing man. And I think I'd only gone on like 3 dates with him when he said, I told him I was not able to sleep and having to walk up and down the cliffs. And he said, well, you know, you shouldn't be doing that alone in the middle of the night. Call me and I'll walk with you. And he did. And he was just the love of my life. And it happened late in life. I was 53 when I met him.
Wow. There's so much I want to dive into with you about true love and your experiences here. One of the things that really stood out to me when we've talked about this for hours and hours, when I visited you here before, is just like that old-fashioned class that he had, the chivalry, the care, and yeah, I just want to hear more of those stories. Tell me about how true love came into your life and what it looked like and how it influenced you, and especially this very independent entrepreneurial side of you. Like, how did that shape and form from true love?
Okay, well, he was very similar to me. So we had this instant compatico, I think it's a Spanish word, but I think it's the best way to describe it, where we didn't have to really learn how the other person was because we were pretty much the same in a lot of regards. He had been very entrepreneurial too, and he had built a bunch of commercial buildings outside of Chicago, and then he got bored with doing that, and he was on the Chicago Board of Trade, and then he, you know, and then he had a mutual fund. So he was very similar to me, and so we really understood each other. And he, the day I knew I was in love with him, my father, you know, has the same genetic mutation that causes cancer. So my father was having cancer for like the 3rd or 4th time. And Mike, I wasn't married to him yet, and he had gone on a ski trip with a bunch of his buddies to Lake Tahoe. And wherever they were going, he had to fly in and then take a bus a few hours to get to where they were going. And the first night he got there, he called me and I was upset. I said, well, my father was just diagnosed with cancer again and he has to have a surgery and, you know, I'm just really upset. And he went, well, okay, well, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, oh, I have a doctor's appointment in the afternoon. And we hung up. The next morning, or the next afternoon, I was walking out of the doctor's office and here he comes walking toward me. He'd gotten on the bus, the 3-hour bus trip, flew back and came to the doctor's office.
Wow.
And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, you need me.
Wow.
And that's when I thought, I think I'm in love with this man. So, yeah. And so I found recently, I've been going through all these files and things and throwing things away, but I found our wedding vows. And one of the things that he promised me was to always take care of me and protect me. And I think that's the function of a man. And a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah.
And so I think that was really special. Really special.
In what ways did you feel that he took care of you and protected you?
In every way. Like he allowed me to be me. And he honored who I was. But he was always right there, you know, making sure that everything was okay for me.
Yeah, I remember you telling me there was like a story about a car, I remember, and travel. I want to excavate some of these like sweet love stories because I enjoyed them so much the first time I heard them.
He was just very special. he was really a genius when it came to the stock market. And so when we were first married, I had a little BMW convertible. And he was a really big, tall person. And also, my car was kind of distinctive. And so anybody would know that that was my car, right? So I came home one day and here's this Mercedes convertible in the driveway. And I went, oh, is someone visiting? Whose car is that? And he said, what's your car? And I went, I don't need a new car. And he said, well, I don't really fit in your car and we might want to go places together. And besides that, I don't want anyone from your past recognizing your car.
Aw, that's actually really thoughtful.
And I said, well, that was so sweet. And he said, oh, it was really easy. I just did a put and I did a call and boom, we have a new Mercedes.
So yeah, I logged into the market this morning, pressed a few buttons, and here, babe, $100,000 car, easy, done.
And that's how he was. He was the most abundant person I'd ever known. And we had, when he retired, we started a little golf accessory company. And once we hired this guy that was supposed to be doing promoting for us, and we'd given him like $35,000 and he did nothing. And I was really upset. And I said, well, we're going to get that money back. That's terrible that he did that. And my husband said, look, we have plenty of money. We're really happy. We're traveling all the time. We're living this great life. Why would you want to get in a fight with this guy? We only lost $35,000, but he lost his integrity.
Wow.
So that was how he was.
Wow.
Pretty amazing person.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can continue to share what that true feeling of abundance was like, because I think in our modern worlds, there's definitely like a lot of pressure, I think, on men to be that way. But I don't know if the angle is right. For example, through social media, like girls will see other women who are flown privately, or they have like the materialistic things, the bags, the clothes, etc. And I think as a result, a lot of men think that they need to go out and make all this money to be able to spoil their woman. But then I think also money can be this means of control where, a man will feel like, okay, I'm doing this for her to have this lifestyle. I want her to be a certain way. I want her to treat me a certain way. Or sometimes it can even be there can be this underlying transaction. I think everyone has seen these couples where it's kind of obvious that the man is transacting the woman's providing beauty or, whatever it is, the man's providing the resources, but there's not like a real chemistry there. And so I think that true love and like that true feeling of abundance of creating can be so rare. And I wonder, what that's actually felt like. Tell me about real love. Tell me about true love and how love has shaped you and how it shaped that, independent businesswoman aspect of you.
Well, I thought that I had been in love with the father of my children. But then when I fell in love with Mike, I realized I hadn't really been in love. I might have been really liked him a lot and thought he was wonderful, but I wasn't in love. So when I fell in love with Mike, it took me about a year to trust that it was real. And so the whole time for that first year, I was thinking, well, pretty soon I'll see the real person.
Oh, no.
I couldn't trust that he was as good as he was. He was really a good person. And so all he wanted to do was make me as happy as I could be. And he would say things from time to time like, well, do you have everything you want now? Is there anything else I can do to make you happy? And just him saying that made me so happy.
Oh my gosh. Future husband, whoever you are, please take notes from Colleen's deceased husband, who clearly has just nailed what being a dream man is like. For real.
Yes. And then he also he was stubborn, like I'm stubborn. We both were stubborn. So you could never tell him, like if you would say, the fence needs to be painted, he wouldn't do it. But if you would say, and I guess it's a little manipulative, but I did it all the time. It would make me so happy if that fence was painted. And he'd hire someone immediately and the fence would be painted.
Wow. No, I love it. You're just reframing the constructive experience that you want to be existing in.
Yeah.
Like instead of being nagging and being like, oh, can you do this or can you do that? You frame it through that lens of love of, it would bring me so much joy if you did this thing, and then vice versa. You're in like that flow. And that's something I've honestly thought about so much. Is something that I've like talked about with, prospective interests, that it should feel like this giving feedback loop. It's like, how can we just always meet each other at that next level of giving and being perceptive to each other's needs and learning each other's deep psychological nuances? And it's like everything's a gift, because the same thing could be a favor if it's positioned differently.
Or it could be transactional.
Yeah,
it could
transactional.
be lots of ways. But basically, we were both givers, and we're both kind of competitive. So we would compete about who could give the other one the most.
Oh my goodness.
Which was beautiful. And so yeah, and it made him so happy to do things for me that sometimes I'd wake up in the morning and I'd think, I can't think of anything to ask him to do today, but I've got to think of something because it makes him really happy to do things for me.
Wow.
And then I'd have to think of something that he could do for me.
Wow. Would he proactively ask you? Would he be like, my love, like, what can I do? What would bring you joy?
Yeah. He was always like, he was great. He was a great person to be married to, and he was fun. Like he would wake up and say, hey, I haven't been to New York for a while. You want to go to New York today? And we just get on a plane and go. And we just had a lot of fun. And he, on the outside, like he was a West Point graduate, and spent his younger years marching around in a little uniform, like a little toy soldier. And so on the outside, it looked like I was more wild and he was more conservative. But then once I got to know him, on the inside, he was more wild and I was more conservative.
That's cute. How did that translate? Like, how did you notice that?
Well, it took me a while to realize it, that like, hey, and I really liked it too. So, yeah.
Aww.
So he looked like Mr. Conservative, mutual fun guy, and yet he was like, had this other part of him altogether.
He was like super playful and adventurous and spontaneous, and sounds like a dream.
Yeah, he was great. And so he also really liked it. Like part of his, act as a human being was like he liked to act how like he was humble. So the way he would show off and feed his ego was by buying things that I would have.
That's
and
so
I thought
cute.
that was a great solution.
So what is an example of this?
Oh, like he'd buy me jewelry or handbags or beautiful clothing, and and that's how he showed off to his friends.
I love that. It's like you roll up to the luncheon, all the boys are there, you just look stunning, and he's like, yes, it's my wife.
Yeah, that was how.
And girl,
what I loved about him the most, his friends would say, because I was much younger and I was much more beautiful, and
how much younger were you
when I met him? Oh, how much younger than him? 11 years younger than him.
It's not that bad.
And when I was younger, I looked different than I do now. But his friends would say, "Oh, Mike, your wife's so beautiful," and he knew I didn't want to be known just as a beautiful person, so he would say, "Not only that, but she's the smartest person I've ever known in my life.
Oh, oh my God.
And I loved him for that because he
Future
wasn't,
hubby, take notes for real.
he wasn't willing to just let it go at like beauty, you know. It's like, oh, she's much more than that.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. Because I mean, the ultimate trophy is one that, the symbol doesn't even touch the great expanse of like what that value even is. And I think for him to speak to that value and just remind other people that you're so much more than your looks, that's a real man.
Yeah, he was great.
Oh, I hope they still make them like that these days.
God, I
For
think
real.
they do. I think that I think there's
I'm like
wonderful people
so
out in the
excited just
world.
hearing
So
this.
many wonderful people, you know. And I think the trick is meeting the one that you're destined to be with. That's like that is a perfect. He was my perfect complement.
Mm.
And I had been divorced for 10 years before I met him, and I vowed I would never marry again unless I met someone who was my perfect complement.
Mm.
And that's what I hoped for, was my perfect complement.
Mm.
He was my perfect complement in every way.
Wow. What are some of your favorite memories with him? Because you had about a decade, right,
Yeah,
before he
before he
started
got
losing his
sick,
health?
yeah.
Okay.
So many of them. Oh, I know one. We looked at this house that I liked, and he thought it was overpriced, so we didn't buy it. And it was like maybe in August that we looked at it, and my birthday's in December. And on my birthday, he handed me the deed to the house. He bought it because I liked it, and he bought it as a birthday present for me.
Wow. And this was in Texas?
That was a house that we owned in Texas. Yeah.
Wow. What was that like?
It was just really amazing that he would go ahead and buy that house and then give it to me on my birthday. It was just, I felt so loved.
I think what's really compelling here is that I think so often in our society, the destination is viewed as the materialism. It's like you get the girl the bag, or you've like have the nice house. And I think what's so compelling is because you both had earned such an extensive amount of resources, it was just this game of like, how can we use the material things in the world to just show that deeper level of devotion and love in like surprise into those new layers? Because obviously I think everyone fantasizes about that to some degree. Like anyone who's had a come up story, it's like, oh, I just want to gift my parents a house. Like that would be like the ultimate goal, is like to give back to the loved ones in life with something material, give them a home, give them a beautiful space. Like what is symbolized through that material thing, giving them that gift to show that appreciation. And what I love about these stories, and I know you so well, I know you're not a materialistic person, which is why I just love hearing about how just this game of like love, devotion, how to just take it to that next level. You were able to just really appreciate all the material elements of the world together. And I think that really is what this is all about. It's like, let's make money and enjoy and create and be gods and live these fantasies and these dreams and this art of life together in these beautiful spaces, and to know that that is their purpose. It's not to slave away for the thing, to be miserable in the thing. It's to use the thing to show that like he loves you anyway. If it's overpriced, who cares? He loves you anyway.
And then also I loved that he wouldn't compromise. We were once on this cruise in the Mediterranean. And I didn't like it, and he didn't like it, but I didn't want to complain, so I didn't say anything. And then I think it was the third day we were on it, and he said, well, do you like this? And I said, no, I really don't. And he said, I don't like it either. Let's get off. And I think we were in Spain, and we just got off the cruise ship and went to Sevilla and stayed in Sevilla a couple of months and had a great time.
Wow.
But he was like, most people wouldn't do that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
it was true.
Yeah. But that's how he was.
Wow. Tell me more. I'm just like soaking
He
this up.
valued his own happiness in what he wanted more than, like most people would say, we paid for the cruise, we should stay on it.
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't enjoying it, neither was I. So he valued our enjoyment of the experience more than losing the money by leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's very wise.
yeah, and he was like that. We would go to different places. I think we were once in, I think, Hong Kong. And we were at this hotel. I didn't really like it that much, and he didn't either. So he just went, we're checking out. We're going, there's lots of nice hotels in Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to stay at this one. And that's how he was.
Yeah.
And he just, I think that was part of his abundance. He knew what he deserved.
Yeah, I love that ability to just ask. And I think oftentimes women have been conditioned to feel uncomfortable about really stating their needs or asking because it may come off as high maintenance. And especially if you're a woman that's detail oriented, you can really feel the vibe. You have a vision for that vibe. You want to live in that highest potential. It can be an interesting tightrope to walk to know how to achieve that while also not coming off as high maintenance. And I actually had this experience not too long ago where I was on this date and I wanted this specific dessert. I was at Gramercy Tavern. I love that place so much in the dining room. And I wanted a dessert from the menu in the tavern. And the lady was like, I don't know. I think that like that's, it's a different menu. I don't know how like the kitchen's gonna feel. And I didn't even say anything. He was like, well, maybe you can ask because I know she would really appreciate it if she could try that dessert. And I was just
I
like,
love
yes.
it. That is great.
Yeah.
That's exactly it, you know? And
like, yes.
yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Just that to know that you really deserve whatever it is you want.
Mm-hmm.
And not being high maintenance about it, but to know that you don't have to settle.
Mm-hmm.
And if something's just okay, maybe you don't want okay. Maybe you want fantastic.
Life is too short for okay. I mean, you can speak to that, I think, more than anyone, having
Yeah.
to face letting it all go again and again, you know?
Yeah, I think that it's just knowing what level you want to live at in life.
Mm-hmm.
You knew you wanted the dessert. You should have the dessert, right?
Yeah.
And there was a man with you who understood that you should have that dessert.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this philosophy does not require wealth or resources to achieve.
Right. No, it doesn't.
I think that wealth and resources definitely can catalyze that process of growth where you get to see and experience all the nuances of what you like and what you need and to learn, But I think that knowing how to just ask for what you want and be empowered in that specificity is a really important way of embracing life.
I think it is. And so once I married Mike, I didn't well, we had a little company that we ran, but it was more of a vanity company. It was a golf accessory company. And it allowed us to go all over the world and play golf all over the world and write it off.
That's cute.
I don't think we ever made any money with that company, but we didn't really care because it was really fun. And so I didn't really work until Mike died because we were just too busy having fun. And he wanted me just to be available to have fun with him, and I wanted to have fun with him. So we had a lot of really joyful times.
What are some of those other favorite memories of some of the most like adventurous or spontaneous moments? And towards the end, so from my understanding, it was about 10 years in that relationship. And Then he was diagnosed with Lewy body syndrome. And then it became this hyper concentrated few years where it was just like bucket list items,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What was that like? Because, okay, so many people think, okay, my bucket list, I want to do this, this, that, that. I think very few are in a position where they know the timeline, they have the resources, and then they can just go full speed on that bucket list of fully living life before they die. What was it like to be his partner in crime in that process?
Oh, it was so much fun. We had such a good time, and we would make up little games like we wanted to stay at all the best hotels in the world and decide which one we liked the best, and games like that we'd make up within doing that. And because he had gone to West Point, he had friends all over the world. And so we were just going all over the world, visiting people and having fun and just really enjoying life fully. Every experience he had ever wanted to have that he hadn't had, and anything he'd ever wanted to do, we did. It was really fun.
Any stand out in particular as being maybe the most memorable?
Yes. His best friend from the time he was at West Point was the deputy ambassador to Thailand for 15 years. And so we went to Thailand for a few months. And during that time, we went to this state dinner, and they seated me next to the man that ran the government of Thailand. And it was so bizarre. And so he was telling me about he had gone to West Point too, and that when he was at West Point, he always wanted to date blonde girls, but they always introduced him to Asian girls. And he was so happy I was sitting next to him because I was blonde. And it was just bizarre. And then the ambassador was into 1960s surf music. So at the end of this dinner, they started playing this 19, and it's like, here I am in Thailand, sitting next to the person that runs the country, and there's 1960s
While he's hitting
music
on you low key. Yeah. And Mike's like, she's not only blonde, she's really smart.
So that was a really interesting experience. All of it was very interesting.
Wow. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. So we had a lot of fun experiences that were just really wonderful.
Wow. Cool. So, as y'all may have noticed, we're playing musical chairs because we're in this gorgeous mountain home in Colorado. It's the first snow of the season. And behind me is this incredibly beautiful and warm fireplace. And my inner cave woman is like, I want to be close to that thing. So, here we are, little musical chairs action. And just to pick up where we left off, Colleen, you were sharing about true love, what some of those adventures entailed, and just this epic 10 years of your life being in this truly complementary dynamic with the man of your dreams, who was tall, handsome, kind, warm, thoughtful, all the things, the list goes on. But the question that remains in my heart and in my mind is, how did you deal with letting him go?
Not very well. Yeah. The day that he was diagnosed, I just kind of fell apart. And he said the sweetest thing. He said, well, if I have to die, at least I got to find out what true love was before I died. And I thought, oh, that's just so sweet of him. Here he is just being told he's going to die, and he's complimenting me and our love for one another. So it was really hard. He was in the hospital for 5 years. So I had a long time to get used to the idea, but it was pretty awful. I mean, I kind of became a hermit for a couple of years and didn't go out and didn't do things and really just grieved. And And to the point where my friend Effie in Maui said, you really need to quit just staying in the house all the time. You need to go out. And she encouraged me to start going places and doing things. And then I rejoined the world eventually. But it was very hard.
Because his death was actually quite complex because from my knowledge, you had this decade that was like a pure dream, an oasis from the mundane world. And then he was diagnosed. And then it was 5 years of watching him slowly deteriorate, lose all of his memory, and just become a completely different human being.
The last 2 years, he was brain dead. And he couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He just...
Why not just, like,
Because we were in a state where they did not have the law that would allow you to do that. So we had to just wait. And it was pretty awful. And there's really not much you can do about grief, because I realized I had grieved my son, and then I was grieving my husband. And you don't have grief. It has you. And it takes you wherever it wants to take you. And you don't really have any control over it. And so it's a really hard process to go through. And I think the more you love, the deeper you love, the deeper you grieve. And so he first came into my life right after my son had died. And I used to joke that he was my reward for having had those years of pain with my son. And then I felt cheated because, wait a minute, now you're taking my reward away from me. And it did not feel right. And it just took me a long time to get over it.
How did you get over it?
Just with time. And with the help of friends, they were really helpful. My two of my friends especially were very, very, very helpful to me during that time.
How so?
Well, one of them, Chelsea Hill, she was Mick Fleetwood's partner. And she used to just come twice a week and just sit and have tea with me and let me cry or let me talk or whatever I needed to do. And so she would take, probably 5 hours out of every week just to be with me in my grief. And then my friend Effie, whose husband had died over a long period of time from cancer, she told me she's just going to be my guide through grief. And she was. She was. She was really, really great. And she was there, and she would explain to me the various stages of grief I was in. And she was wonderful.
Wow. How long did it take to just let it go? Or do you ever let it go?
I don't think you ever do.
I wonder this because one thing that I noticed, I've had probably 3 major relationships in my life so far. And what really surprised me is the middle one, my former boyfriend. We were together 18 months, and I knew he wasn't the one for me, but I loved our relationship. I loved him, and he was so funny. Like, the silliness he brought out of me, I adore that man.
Is that Hunter?
Yeah, it's Hunter.
I have this beautiful memory. Hunter's like 6'5" or something, or 6'6", and this beautiful memory of him standing in the kitchen holding V by one hand. Yeah. So you have that wonderful memory.
Yeah.
And so I don't think love ever dies.
I was so surprised because just like I knew wholeheartedly that we needed to just, go our separate ways and do our own thing. And I've just been so surprised by like how much I just still care about him so much and I love him. And he lives in like a subcategorized part of my universe. It's like he was a planet and we orbited each other. And it's just like we're orbiting other things now, but he's very much there. He's very real. He's still he still exists, you know, and I still care about him so much. And it's so interesting how you can care about someone so much and love them forever, but not want to be with them and they don't detract from like other relationships. Like it's wild. It's like love is this emergent thing and you create with it and that thing exists and lives on forever. And then you create more with it and you create more with it. And it's just, I guess it's very symbolic of life in the universe and how existence is. Like these things don't go away.
Yeah, I truly believe love never dies. And I'm doing all these things now to prepare to die. And a couple days ago, I did a meditation. And what I did is I took every person that was significant to me that I really loved in my lifetime and just thought of them and pictured them and sent love to them. And even though maybe in some cases it may have ended badly or we may have been enemies for a while even, but still in my heart, I still love that person. And even if they did terrible things, still in my heart, I still love that person. So I think once you love someone, at least in my experience, that never dies. So I did this whole meditation and I honored what there was to honor of each of these people that I had loved. And it felt really nice.
Wow. Wow. Did you feel a sense of completion?
I did. And I sent them most of them are still alive, and I just sent them love. And yeah.
I'm curious. I mean, you've had some really intense interpersonal situations in your life with your family, your son, separately with your children. You know, you and your first husband divorced, your second husband, you had one pure decade before, you know, that ended and that, you know, that was like, it's one thing to know someone's going to die and then they cleanly die. It's another thing to watch them degrade over, you know, half the full duration of the relationship into a completely different person and do so in a way where they were clearly tortured. I remember you told me stories where he'd be in the hospital bed and he'd be like, "Are you my wife? Like, can you get me out of here?" You know, it's like that's a very intense thing to go through, to come out of that high of just like this dream with someone and just be shocked by that. And I think leaning back into that original theme of this conversation, how have you maintained a sense of that creative mindset to where you don't fall into victimhood?
It seems to me that, at least in my lifetime, things happen and they guide you to other things. And nothing's ever really wasted. Nothing ever is really that terrible that you didn't get something out of it. And so I believe if you allow yourself to fall into that abyss and become a victim about whatever happened to you, you're not available then to learn from it. You're not available to grow from it. You're not available to see well, sometimes the kernel of what is good about it is just like this big. It's tiny, but you're not
It's the
available
yin
to
and the
find
yang.
that little kernel of what was good.
Yeah.
So I think, for me anyway, to stay open to life and keep saying yes to life no matter what happens. And when something bad happens, you know, the way to win with it is to get over it as quickly as possible. And if you dwell on it or become a victim, it's not going to be possible to get over it that easily.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting how what we focus on expands. And when did it become clear to you that this would be it? Like this would be the final phase of your life and like you would really relax into death?
Well, you know, I don't like limitations as a person. It's not my personality. And so I had to actually see the actual PET scans and see that it actually was in, different parts of in my lungs, in my liver, in my bones. I had to see that on the actual PET scan to really believe it and to really start making plans to leave. And I still go in and out of denial about it. Even, it's been since March is when they told me that. And, I'll find myself like looking at travel sites and where do I want to take the next trip? And then I'll realize you're not going to take any more trips. Or I'll find myself looking at, what's going to be in fashion next year? It's like, you're not going to be here next year.
Wow.
And you're barely getting dressed these days, and you're not going to be buying what the latest fashion is. And so I go into denial sometimes, and I will say, like, I'll forget, and I'll say, okay, I'll see you later. And then I realize, wait a minute, I may never see that person again. So I go in and out of denial. But when I'm not in denial, the beauty of it is, all my life I was highly competitive. And so I had to be the best, and I had to be the prettiest. I had to have the nicest house, the best car, the most successful life, blah, blah, blah. And now I can't do any of those things. And so gradually, like, more and more of my ego is falling away. And I'm able to love more people because I am losing all my defenses. And I'm just openly available to love whoever comes into my life. And it's a really beautiful thing.
What is an example of that?
Let me think. Oh, okay. So this summer I met this woman, and she was a little bit, her personality was a little bit like not kind of prickly, not so nice, but I was like open to her, and I started talking to her, and it turns out that all of her life she had to take care of everybody. She's a very wealthy woman, but she had to take care of everybody in her life. Her parents, her husband, now her sister's really sick, and the sister's really mean to her, but she's still taking care of the sister all the time. And I just felt such love and compassion for her. So I just told her how wonderful she was to take care of people, even when they weren't being nice to her, even when they were being mean to her. And that I really appreciated who she was. And then she just opened up to me, and now she writes me all these loving texts all the time. And I send my love back to her. But she's not a person I would ordinarily have been open to.
It's amazing how sometimes people just need to feel seen to release that guard and just be warm and kind.
Yeah, all they need.
A lot of these people who are just on edge, or it's a lady at the airport who's just like, oh, you have that third item, miss. You're going to have to put that in your bag. It's like, the post office person that's just like, oh, sorry, sir, you got to get to the back of the line. It's, it's like there's so many different people out there, and it's, this specific thing, it's immune to class. It doesn't matter whether you're the wealthiest person. I remember there was this guy that I hung out with, and he had like 15 cars and 5 homes, and his net worth probably at least 500 million. And all he could do was complain. I'm like, bro, you're attractive. You could do anything. You have all this stuff. Like, if you can't figure out how to be at peace and just enjoy what you have, like, what's the point, And so I think that a lot of people out there, whether they're self-aware enough to realize it or not, just need to feel seen and acknowledged for whatever they're going through by somebody. It's like a ray of light through the clouds. And it seems like you gave that woman this experience, and she softened.
She softened right up, and all she needed was somebody to validate her and tell her she was a good person and that what she'd been doing was good. I mean, people were having her do all these things that were hard for her, and nobody was really giving her anything back for it.
Mm.
And yet she was still doing it.
Mm.
And so, yeah, more and more, there was another instance where someone that I knew that was really kind of really quiet and withdrawn and kind of seemed angry all the time, a younger person. And everybody else in the family that I know was really happy and, had their life together. And all I did was just talk about how what I saw in him and how special he was. And he was a deeper thinking person, and he was more profound, and that he was just more aware than his other family members and than many people his age. And they would catch up someday, but right now he was more aware than they were.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had this really profound, deep talk with him. And then I left for the summer. And somebody else called me and said, I don't know what happened to him. He's a whole different person. He's happy and he's open and he's talking to people. And I went, oh, well, that's interesting. So again, it was just validating people for who they are. Because we all are different. And we're all unique, and we all have different things that we can be valued for. And sometimes that's all anybody needs, is just to know that they're valued.
Yeah, that's very true. I feel like you're very good at doing that.
You know what? I think I'm getting better. I used to have a lot more ego that would get in my way sometimes. But as I'm going through this process, and I don't have any need for defenses anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm just becoming probably more who I truly am. And it's nice. That's probably the really good part about all this, is that it's nice to just be able to be loving to people without any other agenda.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think one thing that you could speak to, given your wisdom, and this is something I started realizing, everything exists in seasons. And I think our society sometimes highlights that in markets and, the return of different historical events, or, different things happen. But for the most part, I think there's this delusional fixation on constant growth. And whether that's, you see people in the news and it's just like, oh, they did this and then they did that. It's like this glorified highlight reel. And Instagram, it's like the same. People get this perspective of like, oh, all these things are happening, everything's in motion. Like, what's wrong with me if like my life slows down, or if I have a financial turn, or, if I had a lot of energy when I was younger and then suddenly like I'm lacking motivation. And one of the things that really set in now that I'm approaching the end of my 20s and I'm looking at the horizon of potentially life partnership and kids and all the things I really want to create. And I look at the decade of my 20s, even though I'm not yet fully at that mark, but I just see, oh, it was cyclic. Like there are eras of summers where I was blossoming, winters where I was waiting for the next thing, like I had a few seasons in that time. I maybe had 2 to 3 seasons, 2 to 3 full seasons where I had like 3 full summers, 3 full winters. And when I realized that just like our bodies are bound by nature, so many things in our world are bound by nature. Everything lives in cycles. Nature lives in cycles and seasons. It just made me feel so much more at ease with myself, understanding that in each season, I learned major things that have prepared me to now fully launch and live in my most aligned path. And it also helped me understand that in these phases where I thought I was stagnating and I didn't feel good about myself, I was in a winter. And the lesson was listening, and it was being still, and it was waiting for that spark. And it wasn't just trudging forward at all costs at whatever I thought would bring me money or success. It was like laying low and being wise and working smarter, not harder, and not burning myself out. So you have a birthday coming up. And I personally will not share your age, but if you want to share it, there's a lot of wisdom associated with, the time of life that you're in and you're approaching. And I'd love for you to just share what your relationship has been with the seasons of life and what you've noticed.
Well, personally, I've had some seasons where everything goes right and all the wonderful things happen and all the opportunities happen, and that's how it's supposed to be, right? And then I've had seasons where it's just awful and everything that could ever go wrong goes wrong, and like, oh, something's wrong with that. And I finally have gotten to a place to know that it's all just good. It's like when I first realized that I was going to die soon, because I've been fighting cancer for 22 years, basically, and I realized that, okay, the cancer won, right? And so, of course, with win-lose, I felt like, oh, you're a loser, you lost. And it took me a while to work through that and say, well, no, that's not really what's happening here, And so I think I see our society and myself, because I'm very much a part of our society, but very, very focused on win and lose, good and bad, right and wrong.
It's very dualistic.
Very dualistic. And really, I was telling you earlier, like there's very rare moments where I just see it all as perfection. And there's not right and wrong, and there's not win and lose, and there's not good and bad, and that whatever's happening is exactly what we need to have happen to take us to wherever we're going. So even now I can say, okay, I may not make it to my next birthday, and that's quite all right if I don't, and it's all just what it is. And I'm actually now, I'm a very impatient person. I'm actually getting impatient with the process of dying.
Really?
Yes. So rather than think, oh, I hope I live another month, it's like, when is this going to happen? I've already given everything away, and I've got my estate plan done, and I've got everything ready to go, and now I'm just waiting. And so, yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. So
do you feel, is there anything you wish, like, do you feel fully complete in this lifetime, or do you feel like there's any final thing you wish you had done or could do?
Well, the saddest thing I have in my lifetime is and you know about this, it's not news, but my children are billionaires, and we had a dispute a few years ago over a property, and it caused a huge rift in our family. And looking back, it was just a stupid property.
Yeah.
And it was just money. It was just a property. It was the stupidest thing any of us could ever have done. And I don't know if that will heal before I die, but I do know that I have nothing but love and forgiveness for them. And so I guess my thinking is never value anything over the people that you love and the love that you feel for them. There's nothing else that matters.
But do you feel, because I know you to be someone who values the connection over anything materialistic, so I guess my impression would be like maybe that was more so coming from the other side. Like maybe the misstep on your part was like fueling that a little bit or pushing back in some way to where like it escalated on their side, because I know you to be someone who would choose,
I always choose love.
Yeah.
And so what it was is that a huge sadness that they weren't choosing love. And then trying to understand that and deal with it.
Do you think that there are actions you could have taken that would have not allowed them to latch on to that situation as a means to end the relationship with you at that time?
Well, the only thing I could have done, I did not just walk away from it. I could have walked away from it.
And you think that would have healed the
No,
relationship?
it wouldn't have healed the relationship.
But it wouldn't have made things as bad.
It would have, no, it's just, it would have been more pretentious, where we could have the pretense of if I had walked away, we would still have the pretense of a relationship, but it wouldn't have been
Yeah.
a deep love. So
Maybe there's no way to really.
it might be something that's not
Yeah.
resolvable. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do know that I love them and I forgive them. And I don't know if I'll ever understand why or what happened, but you know, I think if I had it to do over again, I would just walk away.
Is that one of your greatest regrets, is ending up in that situation that drove a wedge between you and your children?
Yeah, it's just such a mystery. Like I've been looking through files and throwing things away, and I found from my daughter a whole box of letters that she'd written to me for all of her life about how much she loved me and how wonderful I was to her and all of that. And so it's still a big mystery to me how this could ever have happened to us. And if anyone had told me before it happened that this was going to happen, I wouldn't have believed it.
So I guess interesting prompt that just popped up in my head. Do you have any final words for her if she ends up seeing this?
Oh, I actually have written many, like maybe about 100 emails to her, and about how much I love her and how I forgive her, and that I never will understand what happened.
So love and forgiveness is key.
I think that's really all there is in life, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough sometimes in relationships when, you know, people make choices and it doesn't make sense and you love them, and it's tough, especially when it results in people stepping away or not engaging in the relationship anymore. And I think it's one of the most noble practices of life is to learn how to relate gracefully and sometimes let things go if that's not possible. So yeah, it's really spectacular, the spectrum of life experience that you've had, and you've definitely touched on great precipices of, you know, contributing to the world in various ways. You've touched the depths of deep love. You've touched the depths of deep heartbreak. You lost a child very young. You know, you also had rifts in the family ecosystem where, you know, your beloved children were not communicative with you for a while. That's pretty intense. You've had amazing friendships that have held your hand along the way. You've traveled the world. What have you not done? I feel like you've done literally, if God could just write a freaking book of like, I'm just going to infuse every emotion into this one woman's life in all these different themes and all this different potential. Like, that would be your life story. Like, what have you not done?
The only thing, this is going to sound so silly because it is really silly, but when I was 20 years old and I lived in Honolulu, and Linda, who's been my best friend since I was 17, was living with me, and she said, "Oh, let's go to this audition." I had been doing a Shakespeare play. I was doing some acting, and she said, "Oh, there's this audition. Let's go to it." And I didn't even know what it was, but I showed up, and they offered me this role in a television series. But I would have had to move to Los Angeles, and I didn't want to move to Los Angeles, so I said no. And so I've often wondered what my life would have been like if I'd taken that path.
Become an actress. Wow. That's an interesting one.
It might have been, who knows,
Yeah.
but I turned it down. I didn't want to leave Honolulu at the time.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any words for the women watching this, because realistically, a lot of the things that you did during the era that you did them were close to impossible. Like the successes you had, the getting hired in certain ways, starting businesses, the way you balanced your family and your entrepreneurial sides. Like there were no models for doing that. Like there, it's not like the news now where you see these women who are doing these things, or you have your role models or your influencers you look up to. Like none of that. It's just like you alone, in that ecosystem. So
There were some funny moments. There was a time, I think it was about 1996, and I was at some event at the convention center in LA. It was a big tech event. And I had a couple guys that worked with me. And there were some software developers that were talking to us, trying to sell us this software. And they were talking to the two guys, of course, and completely ignoring me. And I was just in the background, and finally the guy said, "Well, what do you think? So should we make an appointment, for us to sell you this software?" And the guy said, "Well, I don't know. She owns the company. It's up to her." And those kind of moments were always really fun because it was always unexpected.
Yeah.
And
that's still happening, though. I actually just interviewed a woman named Anya who is the founder of this app called Red Vest. She's 25, and she said recently they went to this investor thing. I think it was TechCrunch, and all the people thought the engineers were the CEOs and founders. And they were like talking to them about, all the stuff. And then they'd be like, she's the one in charge. So that's still a thing. Like that still has not been fully resolved.
Yeah, and it may
many decades later,
It may never be. And what I can see though is like when I was young, when I was in my 20s, it was almost like if you were a woman, you had to prove something. You had to prove. You had to have you had to prove that you could be able to, compete with the men.
Yeah.
And even in those days, we wore little suits that were like what men wear, and that's what you wore to work. And it looked like a little man's suit, except it had a skirt.
Yeah.
And so I think that things have evolved, at least from what I can see, to where you can be fully a woman and dress the way you want to dress and still be successful.
And what words do you have for women who are out there that are trailblazing and, they're doing whatever it is and there is no roadmap?
You just have to make your own little trail. You have to make your own trail. If there's not a trail there for you to follow, you just go through the wilderness and make your own trail.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do.
But I mean, of course, but I feel like, I guess the deeper question is like because one thing that I've always appreciated about you is you're very feminine, you're very graceful, the way you speak, even I know that right now the cancer is growing over your vocal cords and you're a little self-conscious about sounding like Minnie Mouse, but
I do sound like Minnie Mouse.
I think you sound great given the circumstances. Like given the circumstances that you have cancer in over 30 places in your body, I think you look amazing.
Thank you.
I think you sound great. You're very cognitively present.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, one of the things I want to highlight that I've noticed about you is that you feel very authentically feminine to me in your unique way. Not saying that from any stereotypes, but in your unique way, you're always graceful. There's like a softness, but a firmness to the way that you make choices. And I'm wondering if you can just speak to that, like how to hold that balance of not letting this kind of intense high performance mindset of like productivity and extract all the value out of everything and like work to the bone, like how to just really anchor into like the more authentic way to create. And I think women and men fundamentally create differently. I think women are more cyclic, like the earth, we create in seasons. I think men can go conquest and just trudge forward until they've, you know, achieved the goal, slaughtered the, you know, whatever it is, like that saying, like, oh, like you killed it, you know, it's a very
Yeah,
conquesty saying that
it
like
sure
everyone
is.
says. And it's very, I think it's like a very masculine, warring kind of mindset. But I don't think men and women create fundamentally from the same place. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that.
I think as women, we have unique powers that are really there for us to use.
Mm-hmm.
And using those powers, like when I was your age, I would be like the only woman in the boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, what I used a lot was humor.
Mm-hmm.
And I could get away with saying anything and I could laugh afterward and no one would call me out on it because I was a woman. And and I used it all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, we have different, I mean, face it, we have like, we can create another human being inside of us while running a company. Like, we have great power.
Yeah.
And just to own that and know that we don't have to be like anyone else, we can do it our own way. And the more we're our authentic selves and really call on our abilities to create what we want to in life,
Mm-hmm.
the happier we'll be and the more successful we'll be, I think.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I really enjoy speaking with you, and I know we've been speaking for a while, so I wanna honor your vocal cords, and I'm curious if there's any final things you'd want to touch on before we wrap things up.
Well, we were just talking about women in business, and I'm going to give you an example of what I was just talking about, which is I once worked in a company,
Mm-hmm.
and this man that was my supervisor had been a, a football player in college, and he was like really masculine, and I got promoted to a place where I was equal to him, and he didn't like that.
Mm.
So he had a bunch of people that worked for me and worked for him in his office and asked me to come in. And he said, well, when I played football, if we didn't like someone, we'd say, time to turn in your shoulder pads. And I went, I don't know what you're talking about. I was a ballerina. And then all these people that he wanted to embarrass me in front of started laughing. So I think just using who you are and what you are and being true to
Humor.
yourself is probably the most effective thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really, really amazed that just in my lifetime, women have gone a long way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, when I was your age, it was really hard for a woman to be an attorney or a psychologist or a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just normal.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, that's amazing to me that how far people have come.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other part of that is to honor men totally for who they are and what their ways of being are, because they're just as important as the woman's way of being.
Yeah.
And to honor both of those. And I think if we really did honor both of those fully, we would have a society that worked a lot better.
Mm-hmm. What do you hope humanity will accomplish after your passing?
Well, it'd be really amazing if people could just get along. It's just a small ask. It's not that much. But if they'd start focusing more on love and less on hate,
It's
and
true.
more of how we're alike instead of how we're
Totally.
different.
Yeah, maybe more people need to get survive cancer 4 times to get realigned with priorities, but yeah.
Well, I've had an incredibly, incredibly wonderful life. There's not anything that I ever wanted to do that I didn't get to do.
Mm.
There's nowhere that I really wanted to go that I didn't get to go. And there's no experience except for that one little acting thing in my 20s that I didn't do. And so I loved my children. That was one of the happiest times of my life when I was raising my children.
Mm.
And I love them forever. And I think even though it was hard to try to do it all, I'm really happy that I was able to try to do it all.
Oh,
Yeah,
that.
every part of my life was very significant, very meaningful, and very wonderful.
Wow. Any final words of wisdom that you'd like to leave the listeners with? And maybe you can just touch on, what you feel dying with grace truly means, and for anyone listening who's, struggling with maybe seeing the end of their own life, through that tunnel of time, or a loved one approaching that, or even just making sense of life and what it will mean to live and then die. If you could touch on that.
Well, I'm just learning that. I've never been here before, so this is a new experience for me. This is the first time that I've really known that I'm really going to die this time.
Mm.
And so it's new for me. And I'm discovering many wonderful things. Like I said, letting go of defenses and loving people more, and people that are being so wonderful and loving to me. It's incredible how some people that, like my doctor, comes to my house so I don't have to go out and see him.
Wow.
And so many wonderful people that are doing wonderful, amazing things for me at this point in my life. And it feels like it's more than I deserve, even. And so I'm still learning about this whole dying process. I get up every day and I meditate and I journal and I pray. And what I pray for is that I can transition really peacefully without a lot of pain, and with a lot of gratitude for the life I've had and all the people that have been in it.
Wow.
Because more than all the experiences, the people are what really are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but I've had fantasies about my own death.
Really? Like what?
The way that I want to die is I want to live my life and, similarly to you, touch on all the spectrums of what I want to experience and be a creator. And then when the time comes, I want to wake up one day and just feel it. And I want to say my goodbyes to my loved ones in the environment. And I want to go next to a river on my land where there will be a moss bed under a tree.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I want to just
That's really lovely.
lay and melt into the moss.
Oh, that's lovely. That's really lovely.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. I don't think, I think that it's wrong that we have such fear around it.
Around death.
Yeah, I don't think we have to. Like, we celebrate when a baby's born, but then we get really fearful and tense and when someone's dying. And why should it be that way?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's many cultures in history that honor and celebrate death. I was in Bali for a while, and when I was there, my dad and I, we went to these different ceremonies, and they're honoring these different spirits, and they're honoring the dark energies, and they're honoring the positive energies. They're acknowledging and recognizing that in this dualistic state of the universe, where we live on a planet where there's night and day, there's yin and yang, there's sun and moon, there's positive, negative, our coding languages, zeros and ones, like this dual state, the indicators are everywhere. So why give a weight to one and not balance that out with a weight to the other, you know? And I think that that's something our era needs to learn, is just how to be at peace with both.
And really, I mean, if I were, 13, it might be really sad that I'm dying. But I'm 73
Yeah.
and I've lived a really good life. And, I could live another 20 years maybe, but I'm fine with right now. It's okay.
Yeah.
I don't really have any real, I don't feel like I'm being cheated out of time or anything like that. I feel like I've had all the time I needed to live a really full life.
Are you having any spiritual experiences impending death? Like any revelations, any visions, any dreams, anything?
My dreams are really, really amazing right now and very real and very, like I said, I hardly have a differentiation between my waking state and my dream state.
What's showing up in your dream state? Like past experiences, people?
All of it.
Yeah.
And really interesting things and just amazing. And my friend Lindsay that you met recently, she had me sign up for this lucid dreaming class. So I did it. I did the second class. And it turns out I've been lucid dreaming for 20 years. I just didn't know that's what it was called. So she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm aware of my dreams. And she said, do you interact with them? And I went, yeah. She said, but do you know you're dreaming? I went, yeah. She said, well, you're doing it. How long have you been doing it? I said, about 20.
Wow.
So I quit
That's
taking
amazing.
the class because, of course,
you're like, I should be teaching the class.
I don't know. But I'm having really interesting dreams, really, and very vivid. And I think it's probably, again, I'm on my way out. So maybe that's what happens when you're on your way out. I'm reminiscing a lot. My poor friend Caroline was here a few weeks ago. And I was doing it, and then I was like, I'm sorry, Caroline, I'm sorry. You're having to listen to all this stuff from my past. And she went, no, it's okay. I'm here just to do that. And so she was so wonderful. She listened the whole time she was here. So I think it's part of the process of letting go.
Making sense of everything.
Yeah, just letting go of it all and forgiving it all and loving the people that were there. And the whole thing.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Colleen, for joining me and
thank you.
being so kind to just, in your final days, be here, share your stories, talk through what has clearly been developing pain around your vocal cords due to this cancer. And thank you for taking the time and energy to make this happen. I'm so grateful.
Thank you. You are so special. And I'm going to share something that I don't have any control over this, of course, but I'm kind of hoping that I leave on my birthday. Don't you think that'd be kind of cool?
That'd be pretty epic. That would be like tying it up pretty nicely. You're born into the world December 17th, 18th.
Yeah.
You're born into the world the 18th, and you leave the world the 18th, and I would love that for you.
Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking maybe that'll happen. It might be a good thing to do, just kind of exit at the same time that I came in.
I actually really like that.
I do too.
I actually really like that.
I do too. I'll find out if it happens, but I was thinking that might be nice.
the night of, you're like, okay, God, this is it.
I'm ready.
Right now, you and me. Let's go.
I'm just ready to go.
Check the clock. Come on, we have an hour before it turns to the 19th. God, come on. You and me, baby.
I really have been really feeling that for a while, that I'm really ready. Aww. So I hope that it's not too much longer.
Yeah. No, I think, the 18th is a few weeks away.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for spending your final time with me. I'm so grateful.
Oh, I'm so happy that you came to see me. It's been the wonderful thing about knowing, like instead of like getting hit by a car or something where you're just out of here.
Yeah.
But I've known, and they told me in March, and here it is, November, and I've been able to go in the beginning to different places and say goodbye to people I love. And then now that I can't travel anymore, people are coming here to say goodbye to me. And it's so wonderful to have that time to get everything in order, give everything away, say goodbye to everybody you love. So it's just wonderful. And I really thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You're very special.
Oh, I love you so much.
I love you too.
Love you, Colleen.